We've all played video games. We explore, discover, struggle, and fight our way to the end. But in every game, there is a bit that we don't see. A completely unknown world that most people have never experienced in their lives, hidden within the files. Things that Nintendo wanted to add to the game, but never saw the light of day due to one reason or another. And so today, we are going to explore the unseen world of New Super Mario Bros. A game that revolutionized the 2D platforming genre once again, just like the original Super Mario Bros. Did. So let's jump in right now. But first, introducing my new store, Wily.gg, the place to buy your new games and get your hands on eShop cards for Nintendo as well as Xbox. And don't forget, use code Wily at checkout to save 10%. Now let's continue. In the beginning, there was nothing. And then, there was Nintendo, a company that revolutionized the world of gaming and tech forever. For years, they dominated the market and released some of the most interesting and game-changing consoles out there. Now sure, sometimes this didn't work out too well. Nintendo has had many failures from the CDI to the Virtual Boy. However, they have also created marvelous machines that propelled the world into a new era of gaming, and one of those was the Nintendo DS. This handheld game console, produced by Nintendo, released globally between 2004 and 2005, and it blew consumers away. It kinda resembled the old Game & Watch as well as Game Boy SP consoles, but with a major update to its graphics, capabilities, and even brand new features no one had ever seen before. As you can imagine, back then, touchscreens were rare. Heck, they hadn't even released the first iPhone yet, and for many, that was the first time they would ever see or use a touchscreen. Well, aside from the Nintendo DS. Now with this console, Nintendo wanted to take over the industry once again, because before this, they weren't doing so well. And so they had to come up with a plan. A plan to create a Super Mario game that would capture the hearts and minds of the masses. Now in order to pull this off, they started work as soon as they could. And finally, in 2006, New Super Mario Bros. Was released. And right away, it was a hit. The side-scrolling 2.5D action-adventure platformer was the first of its kind and breathed new life into the genre. For a long time, Nintendo ignored the 2D titles after all. And this return to form was welcomed by almost every fan of the franchise. And so Nintendo entered a new golden era, a time where they reigned supreme and made billions. But behind the scenes, Nintendo left certain bits out of their killer New Super Mario Bros. Game. Certain items, enemies, ideas, and more that we have never, ever seen. So, let's jump into the unseen world of New Super Mario Bros. Once you start digging into the files, you will find all kinds of gold, and one of those is these weird brick blocks. This set of bricks actually depress when landed on, and act as an immensely powerful springboard, one of the strongest ever seen. However, sometimes they actually don't do anything, so you won't be reaching for the moon each time you see them. Now, we have no idea why Nintendo didn't add them to the game. As far as we can see, there's nothing wrong with it after all. Well, aside from one thing, it can be very glitchy. For example, it doesn't work well at all with mini mushrooms. But as far as we know, these were made very early on in development, because they used the same brick texture seen in the earliest videos and screenshots of the game, so it may have been a placeholder. Nonetheless though, I like the idea of it a lot. Nintendo could have used this for some interesting platforming action, especially because some of them do act as a springboard, while others don't. And as we all know, Nintendo loves to trick players. But as you can imagine, this is just the beginning of it all. Because another thing I found hidden in the depths was an unused enemy. Now it's known as an invisible lava bubble, and it shares most of its code with regular lava bubbles, but it moves horizontally instead of vertically, which is a bit weird. And as you can see in the footage right here, pointing ghost hands point at it. And if you do get hit by it, the lava bubble briefly appears on screen. Now personally, I don't really understand why they even made this. It seems like an odd addition to the game, and I have no idea where they could have used this. So personally, I'm glad they didn't use it. It seems very sloppy, to be honest. But this isn't the only invisible thing in the game. They also made a coin spawner that you can't see, and it has two modes. One spawns a set number of coins at a set speed when a flag is triggered, and the other spawns a coin every time a special audio sequence event is triggered. If you look at this stuff, it kinda reminds you of things that were seen in later games. For example, maybe the game was intended to have playable coin-themed credit sequences, like in later New Super Mario Bros. Games. New Super Mario Bros. 2 is the most similar to this after all. In that game, coins spawn at fixed times in a level, so they are essentially timed to the music. It could be that they were experimenting with this concept during the development of this game, but didn't use it in the end. But when they were working on the sequel, they picked up the idea once again. This is something Nintendo does a lot. Even in more recent games, we can see examples of this, like in Super Mario Odyssey. That game draws inspiration from many earlier 3D titles like Super Mario Sunshine and 64. So maybe that was the case here as well. It certainly is interesting. And this isn't the only big feature they wanted to add, because inside the files you can also find cut transition animations that hint towards a big cut feature: more characters. They are found inside window lz.bin. And sure, most of these transitions are obviously remnants from Super Mario 64 DS, but not all of them. For example, the faded circle and wave transition didn't exist in that game. Furthermore, all of these were made into this game's format, which is a different format than the one used in Super Mario 64 DS. So clearly there was something going on here. Could it be that Nintendo actually wanted to add more characters aside from Mario and Luigi? Even if you look at the final version of the minigame screen that we got, you can see that Wario and Yoshi are there as well. So maybe they would have also been playable characters in the game. But this wasn't the only potential big thing that was cut from the game, because there was also an entire power-up outfit removed. Because in the files there are these unused power-up textures, and the white one is used for the star power-up. However, in the end, they are never used, even though almost everything is set up correctly by Nintendo. So it could actually work. But nope, Nintendo messed with one thing, and so it is never seen in the game at all. And personally, I'm a bit disappointed they didn't use them. Now, so far, we've been looking at all kinds of items, special hazards, and more. However, now we will move on to the biggest attraction. So, drumroll please. We will be looking at cut levels. And my gosh, there are so many of them. So let's dive right in. Now, when it comes to the cut levels, they got rid of a lot of multiplayer levels for some reason. There are loads of them. So let's start with the first one. If you look at this level once, you can immediately see that it's very different. Unlike the one seen in the game, this one isn't just a horizontal experience. In this version, you can also move up. In the end, the levels utilize more because it's not just going from left to right, which in my opinion was a good thing. Aside from that, the level had more enemies, more pits you could fall in, and more stuff in general. It presented a real challenge to players. So personally, I think it's very disappointing that they didn't actually use this version. Sure, it might have been a struggle to deal with the platforming challenge and your opponents at the same time, but it has more replayability in my opinion. opinion. I especially like stuff such as the moving platforms. This would present any player with a challenge and could give you opportunities to mess with your opponent. Now, when it comes to the second level, it is once again very different from what we got in the actual game. This level is beyond wild. As you can see, it is round and not horizontal at all, which again allows for some interesting platforming options. And it also includes a wide variety of objects, like grates, ice, lava bubbles, and even the unused pillars, a gigantic springboard, and lava tiles. Now in the final game, no sprite set combination exists that allows all of these sprites to show up at once. So this level was truly unique. Heck, they even included enemies you don't see in any of the versus levels in the final game. It really shows how wild these levels were before they started altering them. And I also gotta admit, it is massive, which you can see in the footage as well. And again, there were loads of sections with platforming challenges and opportunities to screw over your rival. And the further you go down the list, it actually becomes more and more crazy because the early version of level 3 is even bigger than the last. It is filled with Koopa paratroopas that allow you to reach another platform, because the pits seen in this level are huge. For that reason, they also added pipe cannons. That way you can get around a bit easier. However, there are also doors everywhere. And if you go into one of these, then you will soon find out that there's also a lower level. And again, it is filled with gigantic pits. Overall, you can see that this level really focused on those pits, and so Nintendo created all kinds of platforming challenges around them. Clearly, this level uses multiple backgrounds and tile sets per area. However, this mode does not work in the final game. That's why the footage looks a bit weird. Now, I get why this one wasn't added in the end. It looks quite tough, especially if you also had to deal with an opponent. Luckily enough, the next level is actually a lot more calm, but still, it is very different from the one we got in the game. It has a desert setting instead of some sort of pipe maze that we saw in the final game. And this cut level also appeared in a show demo at E3. And surprisingly enough, at the end is an old-style staircase and flagpole. But as you can see, the flag does not fit onto the pole correctly. Now, this is the only level that is similar to what we got in the final game. These are a lot more calm and straightforward. But still, it's an exciting desert level filled with tornadoes, which allows you to explore the level more, and it's filled with the typical desert hazards and enemies. So really, there isn't much to say about this place. However, all of that changes as soon as we move on to the final versus level, because that one is absolutely insane. And once again, it was shown off at E3. Now, if you look at it, you can see that it's basically a bigger version of the previous level that is split up into two sections, just like we saw with the third cut versus level, but it looks more like a normal level, just like the last one. It is very linear, which could have been added to create more diversity. Aside from that, I will admit it isn't too exciting, especially compared to the levels I mentioned earlier. It just reminds me of a normal Super Mario level instead of an actual versus level. But maybe that's the case because they did use it to show stuff off at E3. And yes, all of these were labeled as versus. But one thing is clear, the early versions of the versus levels were a lot more wild than the ones we got in the end. These cut versions are more challenging, a whole lot bigger, and are filled to the brim with all kinds of stuff. Personally, I don't expect them to be so different from what we got in the final game, but I get why they changed them, because sheesh, this would have been hard. But before we end this video, I want to look into one more mystery, something most of you have been curious about. I'm certain of that. In the introduction, where Mario walks towards the castle after observing a lightning strike, there appears to be moving people in the background, but due to the resolution of the game, it is difficult to tell what they are supposed to be. Now, common sense suggests that they were meant to be toads, and a leaked document actually confirms this. And when the game is played in a higher resolution, it turns out they are copies of the Toadsworth model moving around with no animations. And I bet they most likely chose to use the Toadsworth model as he resembles Toad and they had it on hand. But I bet you didn't know that at all, because in the original the resolution really is not that good. But thank the Lord for upscaling and emulation. Now clearly the files of New Super Mario Bros. Are filled with interesting bits that most players never got to experience. An unseen world that almost no one gets to see. But now you have seen it. However, the journey doesn't end here, because I have more videos on my channel. So go check those out. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is, again, a bit of a new context show. I'm gonna experiment with longer videos to see how that goes. This show, I thought of it and I thought it was cool. So let me know down below what you think of it. Like, subscribe, bell button, all that stuff, you know. Join, become member, all that stuff. And let me know in the comments down below what you want to see next. Give me ideas. And yes, I do read the comments. You silly goose. Bye.